what were your impressions besides your uncle and a colleague really encouraging you to go abroad in the United States? What were your impressions then before you came to the United States, and were you aware of the prestige of Berkeley back in
I
India?
started to, as I became more inquisitive about what the place is and so on. I think Berkeley was not as high on my list as California in general, and I knew a little bit about California. I think my impressions of the US were from subscribing to Time magazine. When I was at college, it was a very expensive thing, and I think our library had subscribed to it, and so I started reading Time magazine and became more familiar with the US politics and other things and so on. But in general, I had an impression about US as being a very nice place to go. Now, one theme which I would highlight is that at that time, my impression of India and my impression of the West, which persisted for quite a while, and to a certain extent, I think even rationally, is that in general, the Indians were inferior and the West was superior. And if we could just learn from them on, and this is true from a professional standpoint, this kind of impression was well founded because the quality of cars and simple things. I'll give you one interesting, funny example. Um, when I applied for a visa, an American visa, I had to go to Chennai, at that time Madras, from Bangalore. And so this officer was interviewing me. And so he says, have you filled out this application? So I said, fine. He says, can I make a copy of it? I said, sure. And next to his desk was a Xerox copying machine. And that blew my mind because we used to cyclostyle them, which was you had to wrap the paper around a drum and so on and so forth. And I sat there and looked at him. I says, wow, this is amazing. And I tell you, even more interesting than that was that when he took my application, he stapled it. And I am an engineering graduate. I'm sitting there, my mouth fell open. I says, what a beautiful device. I've never seen anything, because we would have a pin,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And then he said, oops, I made a mistake. So he unstapled it. I said, this is a country I want to go to, definitely.
Now, had you considered the UK in any way? Had you
No,
considered England at
no,
all? Had you known?
no.
Had you known anyone who'd gone to
No, I
England?
didn't know. I think that by that time, U.S. was the place to go to. UK had a sense that, first of all, I think we were slaves to the British for a long time, and we don't have a very good impression about how they left us, and so that left an impression in my mind. I didn't like the British from that standpoint because they had enslaved us for so long. The U.S. actually had helped us free us from the UK, and it was founded on freedom. But more than that, I think that the U.S. was forging ahead much faster than the UK, and so that was a place to go. So no, not even close to it. I had not even considered that. No.
And you began discussing the process for securing your arrangements for coming to the United States. Were there any other fiery hoops that you had to jump through in terms of securing funds, or?
Well, I guess the only other thing was that my parents were just shocked.
Really?
Because they had visualized that their we are a close family, and they expected us to stay there, and and they had heard, and to a certain extent truly, that people, once they go, they leave and never to come back. So it was a matter of just, the world was a lot smaller at that time. It isn't like here where you can call at 3 cents a minute, and airplane rides were, you had to save for 10 years before you could get on. And so it was very remote. The world was truly remote at that time. And so they had some reasons to be antsy that their son was now just going to, we'll never see them again. So it's interestingly enough, they came all the way from New Delhi to Bangalore one time where I was working, and now I was working on the applications, and I used to keep them abreast that I'm really excited, I want to go. And they came and pleaded and say, come on, you don't know what you're getting into and what's going to happen. You might marry an American girl and you'll be completely lost to us, all kinds of things and so on. But I think by that time I had made up my mind, and that I was going to come. So that was
difficult.
The only difficulty that I had. I think funds wise, interestingly enough, Berkeley had said that, listen, the first semester you have to pay for yourself, but if you can maintain a 3.5 average, then we'll give you either a teaching or a research assistantship. And so I worked my tail off to make sure that it happened. So I think I borrowed some money from my parents, but not that much. And after that, I was able to maintain my own.
And so how did you actually travel to the United States? Did you fly? Did you take
I flew Pan Am, and into my first port of call was Honolulu.
So you went across the Pacific?
Yeah. Yes. And Pan Am put me up on this hotel in Hong Kong, and oh my goodness, I had a room to myself, which was so comfortable and posh. It was just amazing. And I remember my first stop after Calcutta was Rangoon, Burma. And I had never seen non-Indians up to that point. It was a shock.
This is the first time you'd left the country?
First time I left the country.
Was it the first time you'd been on a plane?
First time I went on a plane, exactly.
Mm.
It was just an amazing experience. And then we landed in Honolulu. And out of all the things, again, the thing that impressed me more than anything else was that our bus driver from the plane to the terminal, because there was no, walking across, was a woman. Again, I said, I cannot believe this. I've never seen women drive a bus, let alone a car before. And then my friends received me at Berkeley.
I'm so sorry, what year was this?
64 January.
January 64.
Yes. I recall this was 2 months after the assassination of
in November 63.
John Kennedy. And I was so inclined to be in America that that affected me. It's as though he was my president. He was a very popular person anyway, but I had gotten sufficiently Americanized even before I got here that upset me a lot. I still remember that. And then 2 months later I was here.
Right. Huh. Did Berkeley actually accept all of your... Did you begin as a graduate student then?
What an interesting situation that was. So I told my mother that, listen, here's the promise that I would make. You tell me that I may not come back, I promise I will be back. And I don't break promises. Okay, so number one. Secondly, you have to allow me 5 to 6 years to do my PhD. She said, oh my goodness, that's a long time, but okay, fine. So I came here to do my PhD. Don't ask me why, because I didn't have the slightest idea why I wanted to do PhD or anything. I just thought, I want to go for the highest thing, whatever it is. So that's what I came for. So I got to Berkeley, and my advisor, who is a very popular person in this area now, his name is Dr. Wartenberg, Dr. Bill Wartenberg. He's on not Channel 11, the ABC radio. What is that called?
KABC?
Not
Is-
an, you know, the 810
Okay.
San Francisco radio. So he's a talk host there at the evening, and a very, very important science-oriented person. He was my advisor. So he looked at my transcripts from Sindri, and so to go back a little bit, what happened was that when I left Sindri in electrical engineering and electronics, I had done vacuum tubes. In the meantime, the world had changed to solid state physics, and I had maybe taken one course on it, but I really didn't understand much about that. He looked at it and he immediately saw, he says, "Have you taken some physics and math courses?" I said, "You know, just the normal engineering ones." He says, "Do you realize that for you to do PhD, you would first have to do some remedial undergraduate courses, physics, mathematics, statistics, and so on and so forth. It might take you a year or two before you come to a point where the graduate students are ready to do PhD. And so, you know, you don't have a very strong background." I was so depressed. I said, "I don't know what to do." So there was a senior Indian student, Mr. Goel, in Berkeley, who was doing his PhD in metallurgy. And so he told me, he says, "I have an idea. Okay, first of all, why do you want to do PhD? Explain to me." And when I couldn't give him a convincing answer, he says, "I have an idea. Okay, first of all, drop doing PhD. There's no reason for it. From your personality and so on and so forth, you don't look like a kind of a research type anyway. You should be going out the world and earning money and so on and so forth. Secondly, go into computer science. And the reason is that computer science, you can take Boolean algebra and do software, and none of that would require solid state physics. And you can start from the beginning, and you're smart enough, I think you can pick it up. You can do your master's, you get a job, and you're through." I could not refute that reasoning. The more I thought about it, I went to Dr. Wartenberg, and he says, "Yeah, that'll work. So let's do that." So I said, "Okay, I'm just going to go for my master's program." And so for a year and a half, I was at Berkeley, and then IBM offered me a job. And I joined IBM in September of '65, and you know, so the only thing was the 6-year promise from my mother. So at least I have another 2-3 years to work here.
Right.